my name's Angela and this is Devon Threadtails. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I am trying to revive a little bit of new life into an old garden chair. So my husband and I are going to tackle this project together, and it's not a very expensive chair. It could be something really that we could just ditch and buy a new one, but there isn't really anything wrong with it other than a few little bits and pieces that need fixing and a little bit of a touch of paint and some new cushions and things. And so because there was a bit of sewing involved, we thought, why not actually share the video, or record a video and share with you the process that we go through. Like I say, it's nothing fancy, it's nothing really amazing. It's just giving a new lease of life to an old piece of furniture. So I hope you enjoy.
So the chair is located next to the summer house in our garden, and it's a really cute little spot where actually it's the only place in the garden that gets any shade when it's very hot in the summer, and it's really nice to be able to sit there and escape the sun and just have a nice cup of tea when you just want to sit outside but don't want to get too hot. It's also the only place in the garden that gets any sunlight in the last couple of hours of the evening. So once the garden's all in shade, there's a really nice piece of evening sun that's just here, and it's really nice just to sit and enjoy a quiet cup of tea or a glass of wine, or just sit and chill and read a book.
So the first thing we're going to do is, I think my husband's going to rub over some of the metalwork with some sandpaper and a wire brush and get rid of all of the little bits and bobs, the mess that's on it and rust and what have you, and make sure all of the bolts and things are nice and still secure. I don't think he's going to take it apart. I think we're going to actually just paint over it because it's a really strong solid structure. And then we've taken the chair piece off here, which is looking really awful. So we're trying to decide what to do, because this back piece here is needed to lean against when you're actually sat on the chair, and obviously this bit here as well. We're actually going to put a piece of wood over the bottom and then cover that with foam. But this back piece, to get it off and to put a new piece on, I think would be quite difficult. And actually, if you look at the back piece, other than it being a bit dirty, it is actually a waterproofed, really good, strong piece of fabric, and it hasn't actually ruined in any way. So we're going to keep that on and just cut the bottom section off and give that a really good clean. And then I think what we're going to do is we're going to go over it with some waterproof spray and just waterproof it and make sure it's all okay. So that's what's going to happen with the framework. So all of what John's doing with the framework over there, he will also do with this as well. So John's going to start painting it now with the Hammerite. I'll put a picture up on the screen of the Hammerite and the colour that we're using. We're trying to get it so that it sort of ties in with another piece of furniture that we've got over there. So this doesn't need any type of undercoat or anything. Will it need more than one layer?
Shouldn't do.
And it's just going to really protect it and give it a fresh lease of life, and yeah, hopefully it'll look really nice. Okay, so this is the progress so far. The whole frame has been painted, and we have a piece of wood that's been reinforced, and John is going to waterproof it as well. So that's what's going to form the seat for when I put the foam cushion on top. So that's the frame. I think it's looking pretty good. And yeah, I'll show you when we've got the cushion on it. Okay, trying to think about what I'm going to do with the cushion and not getting very far because someone's being a little bit unhelpful. So the design of the cushion is, it has this little extra bit here on the back, which then hooks over the back of the chair to keep it in place. and obviously it has these little ties which you can tie to the frame, and then it has this bit here which just dangles down. It's just decorative. I don't really like that, so I think I'm going to imitate what's on the top on the bottom as well, so it all keeps it in place. And I'm going to try and cut this up and get some kind of pattern off of it, and I'm going to go and buy some new foam, because what's in it is actually very, very thin, so I think it'd be nice to have something a bit fatter and nicer on the bottom. But what I have had a look at, there's a little bit of a tear in this, and I've had a look, and what's inside does look absolutely fine. So what I might do is double up the back section with this, so put the bottom section in with the back, so the back is doubled up, and then just get a really nice thick piece of foam for the bottom section. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start cutting it out and see where I go from there. I'll share it as I'm going along, but first of all I need to get this little monkey off.
So the problem you've got with trying to do this with your dogs around is they want to help.
It's a nice new cushion, you know. It's only because it's all old and tatty. I have to make you a matching dog bed, mightn't I, to sit next to it. Dear oh dear.
She wants to sit there now.
Okay, I've brought all the pieces of the fabric inside because it's a little bit windy outside and they keep blowing around, but I've unpicked everything. Just laid this out on my kitchen floor. It's actually going to be a lot easier than what I thought it was going to be. It's actually essentially just two big pieces of fabric sewn around, and then a stitching line right through the middle, which doesn't butt up tight to the foam on the inside. It still leaves a little bit of space so that you can fold the cushions and they will sit together on the actual seat itself. So I've unpicked all of this and I'm going to just measure this all out. It's just literally 2 rectangles or 2 squares and sewn together. And then on the corners, I've left one of them not unpicked. Was it this one? Sorry. It was this one actually. So we've just literally sewn across the corner to create that box. So I'm just going to copy that and mimic that when I sew that in the fabric that I've done. So then obviously there's the bottom section, which I don't want to do, so I'm just going to not copy that at all. And then the top section, which helps to hook the seat onto the frame itself, and I'm going to do that on the top and the bottom so that it hooks on both sides and won't hopefully fall off. And then there are also some ties here, which I'll probably put some ties on. I don't think we actually ever use the ties, but anyway, I will copy them just in case. So I'm going to get on and cut my fabric out. Oh, another helper again. So this is the fabric that we've chosen. My husband and I went to a place called Trago Males and we tried to choose something that we thought would tie in nicely in the garden. John particularly wanted something green because he thought it would be nice and gardeny. And I wanted something that wasn't too pale because I thought anything that was too pale would get dirty quickly. This is actually a really, really thick upholstery fabric. It's a cotton and it was very inexpensive. It was only about £4 or £5 a metre. I bought lots of it because what I'm going to try and do is make a couple of cushions on some of our other garden chairs just so that it all ties in with each other. So I've used the other cut out pieces of the fabric from the chair as a template, and I've cut out some new pieces, and I'm going to start with just making the ties. So I've cut out a piece of fabric. It's not I don't know how wide it is, but I've just sort of cut it roughly 1.5 inches wide, something like that, and then I have pressed it in half and then into the center, wrong sides together, and press that all together like that. And I'm just going to stitch down the edge of there to keep that tied together. I've just done one really long piece and I'm just going to cut it in half. I actually remembered as I was doing it that I had a buyer's tape maker set that I've never used before, and I just got it from eBay I think, so I actually used this and pulled the tape through it, and it literally comes out like that, and you press it as you're pulling it out, so then all I had to do was fold it in half again, so that made that really easy. If I can find where I got that from, I will put a link to it in my description on the video, because that really made things very, very easy. And I have to say, now that I've done that, I might be more inclined to have a go at making my own buyer's tape in the future too. So I'm starting with the strips that are going to hold the cushion in place once they're on the chair. I've already sewn one of them and I've just sewn that in place as a hem. I haven't sewn any of the other edges, just literally the bottom bits, so that that's all finished when I attach that to the seat piece. And what I've done is I have ironed it over by 1 centimetre and then by 1 centimetre again. And one of the things that I always find really easy to do is I actually stitch a line of stitching 2 centimeters up. So say for instance I want to do a 1 centimeter and then another 1 centimeter seam, I stitch a line of stitching at 1 centimeter, I iron that up to the stitch line so it's nice and easy to follow, and then I just press that over again, and then that's what I'm going to sew down. And if you stitch it in a long enough stitch, once you have done it, you can just pull that line of stitching out if you think you can see it and you don't want it to be on show, but I don't think that's going to be the case here. So I'm going to get that stitched down and then we'll get on with the next bit. Okay, so I've had a really good look at the original seat and how it's been constructed, and I'm going to try and mirror that completely. And what it looks like it has had done is it has the main body piece, then we have the piece that flapped down at the front, so I'll lay that like that, and then the back obviously would then sandwich that over the top like so, and that gets sewn along here, but it then only gets sewn a really small amount up here, and then the cushion is inserted and then it's actually sewn once the cushion is inserted. Now if I'd thought about it, I probably could have cut this so that I could have inserted a zip to make life a little bit easier, but I just didn't think about that at the time, so it's a little bit of a shame, but it's absolutely fine. I think I have decided that instead of this being a piece to actually encase the rest of the frame on the seat section, I am going to have this overhanging. I'm just not going to have it shaped like the previous one because I didn't like that and how that looked. So I am going to finish off this edge and the other edge on this long piece before putting it in. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that like that. I'm going to sandwich it between the two layers, the front and the back, like so, and I'm going to stitch along there, and I'm going to stitch a small way up here, but just far enough so that I can then make the box pleat in the corner, and I'll come back and show you how I do that in a moment. So I've sewn around this bottom edge and I've encased the little flap that's going to dangle down at the front of the seat. Try and show you that. It's quite difficult because I've got a small space and lots of fabric. So this is the little bit that's going to be left loose, and this is the main seat, and this is the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around where I've stitched, and I'm just going to take off a little bit of that excess fabric, just not even by half the amount that's there, with my pinking shears, just to reduce the bulk. And then what I'm going to do to create the box pleat is I'm going to separate the front and the back like so. And once this has been reduced, this sort of bulk of seam allowance, I'm going to stitch just straight across by about maybe an inch down from where I've the seam actually joins. I'm going to stitch right across, and that will cause the box pleat on both the front and the back part of the seat. So I'll show you that as I'm sewing it, but I'm just going to whip around first and cut off that excess fabric with my pinking shears. Okay, so I've trimmed that all around with my pinking shears, and if you don't have pinking shears, that is really not important. You can just use straight scissors, that's absolutely fine. It's just, I have pinking shears, so that's what I've used. I've also just taken off a little bit across the corner of the, where I've joined the seam, and I have gone ahead and I have already sewn the first pleat so that I can show you what it looks like. So on the opposite side, when you pull that out, you have the box, if you can see that there, the box that's going to be created for the foam to sit in, and then this is just the little piece that's going to dangle down the front, covering the rest of the wood and the metal frame of the seat. So I'll show you how I do that box pleat. Okay, so to create that box pleat, once you've trimmed everything around, what you're going to do is you're going to pinch one side of your fabric and the other side of the fabric, so the two pieces of fabric that you've just stitched together, and you're going to pull them apart like so, and then that's going to create a little triangle coming down like this, because you're going to pull it apart coming down from the point of the seam that you've just joined. I'll do that again. So there's the corner. You're going to pull this side and this side away from each other, and then press them together like that, and you'll end up with like a little triangle. I'm going to put a pin in that. I've got my seam allowances all to one side, and I'm just going to stitch down roughly an inch or so from where that point is. And just for reference, I'm using a 100 needle, but I am only using an ordinary general use thread of cotton in my machine. So I'm just going to sew totally straight down this seam. Secure it with a couple of reverse stitches, and at the other end, oops, and then hopefully we'll have the same effect on this side. So yes, we've got a box pleat with the flap of material coming out of it as well. So I think that looks quite neat, and I'm not going to actually cut this away, because once I've started putting all of the foam back in together, I want to make sure that it fits properly, and if by chance it doesn't, I can always unpick that and restitch it either further in or not quite as far in as what I've done, but hopefully that'll be about right. So I'm going to go ahead and start attaching the other end of the fabric as well. I've now pinned in the other end, so the end that's going to go on top of the chair, and this time I have actually pinned in the whole of this little bit of fabric, so that's going to be completely sewn in all the way around the edge and not left loose like the other one, and so that all the way around. I'm going to leave this center area open because that's where I'm going to be putting the foam a little bit later. So I'm going to get that sewn in, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the pleats in exactly the same way as I did before on the opposite end. So I'll get that sewn up and then we'll get on to inserting the foam. Okay, so I've got all of that sewn in. So I've got this section here which is going to hook over the top of the chair, and that's all sewn in nicely. What I'm going to do before I do anything else now is I'm going to give everything a good press, because I haven't actually pressed any of it. And then I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew down the sides to halfway, insert the top edge of the foam, and then sew that across the centre, and then I will deal with the bottom edge of foam in a moment. So I'm going to give everything a press and then show you how I'm going to insert that foam. So I've measured down the length of my piece of fabric, and I've measured where the halfway point is, and I've just pinned each of the sides. I've got it folded over because it's quite big, just to show you what I've pinned. So I'm just going to carry on sewing down here just to the halfway point, and I'm going to back stitch it just to make sure it's nice and secure. I'm then going to insert my piece of foam, and I'll show you how I do that and how I'm going to secure it in at that point. Okay, so I'm now at the stage where I'm going to put the foam into the cushion. I've got this end, which is the end which is going to overhang, and then this end which is going to sort of pin over the top of the seat. And before I put that in, what I've done is you won't be able to see it because there's lots of stripes on here, but up close you can see I've actually drawn a line at the centre mark with my chalk. I might have to pin that or draw it in a little bit darker when I come to sew it, because once I've input that foam in there, I'm then going to actually stitch along here. So I wanted to mark that before putting the foam in. What I've also done is when I ironed this, before turning it over, I've actually pressed over the seam allowances on both of the edges, on both sides here and here, so that when I come to sew the next section it'll make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to put the foam inside, and then I'll come back to you and show you when I've stitched along this centre section here. Okay, so I've inserted the piece of foam and I've pinned it all the way along at the centre, and I'm going to take that to my machine and sew it in. It should be quite easy because the foam is really soft, and you know, it shouldn't get caught under the machine. It shouldn't make it too bulky, but if it does, then I might use my zipper foot and just move my needle to one edge, and I'm just going to really make sure that I don't catch any of the foam in it as I'm sewing it along. So I'm going to sew that along, and then we'll get on with putting the final piece of foam in. Okay, so I've inserted the second piece of foam, and where I have pressed the seam allowances under, I've pinned this all down, and I'm going to sew down here in a moment. I'm going to use my zip foot or zipper foot and just move my needle slightly so it makes it easier, because it's going to be a bit of a tighter squeeze to sew this than it was to sew this centre line here. There's obviously a little bit of a gap here, and that means that you can fold this up and it doesn't sort of interfere with each other when it's on the seat. And then obviously I've just remembered to put the ties in, which is what I took out on the other one. So, or these are the ones that I made earlier, sorry. So it replicates the other one. But I have to say, I'm really pleased with how it's looking. The whole of the frame is now all painted, so it's just a matter of sewing down these side seams, and that will be it. We'll be able to put it all on, and I'll be able to show you. Okay, so I've got my zipper foot on, I've moved my needle position over slightly further to the left, and I'm just going to sew down this seam here to hold all of the foam in place. And that's the seam all sewn up. So because I've pressed those seams under before sewing them, they are actually all nice and neat, and yeah, ready to put on the chair. There we have it, all back in place. Really pleased with that. So the most expensive thing about doing this was the pot of paint. The wood that we replaced the seat with was just a piece of old wood that we had lying around, and obviously then that was waterproofed, and we had some waterproofing, so that wasn't too bad. The fabric was about £2 or £3 a metre, so that was really inexpensive. Once I started taking it all apart, I realised that the foam was adequate enough to use for the seat, so I didn't even have to buy new foam for that. So I'm really pleased with how that's come out, and now when it's really hot in the daytime, that's a lovely little place to sit in the shade, and when the evening comes and everywhere else is shady, that's the place that we get the last sort of half an hour to an hour or so of sunshine, so we can sit and enjoy a nice cup of tea. Anyway, really pleased with that. Hope you've enjoyed sharing it with us.